Well, guys, we are having a manly discussion, and I got a bunch of men. That's a good thing to do for a discussion like this. To talk about kind of just culture and our experiences, because oftentimes I think we can feel, just a little intimidated or limited in what a man is kind of culturally versus maybe what we experience in our own life. I think, like, in some ways, it's funny that, early on, I think we get an image portrayed to us on what it means to be a guy. Sometimes that image comes from pop culture, but sometimes it comes even more personally. Just talk to me about that a little bit from your upbringing, as far as like either your dad or somebody in your family, of how that shaped your idea of what it means to be a man, and how that affected you one way or the other. I'd just like to talk about that.
Yeah, I don't grow up with my dad. I grow up with my relatives. My dad basically give me this worldview or a life philosophy. It's basically just life is tough and suck it up. And even though I didn't get a chance to spend a lot of time with him, but I think that kind of really stuck with me, and that's how I kind of view life or view to be a man, is to like, hey, whatever challenges comes in, whatever difficulties, I'll just suck it up. I'll be the biggest sucker, and just overcome it and just move on.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I grew up without a dad as well. My dad divorced my mom when I was probably 4 or 5 and died when I was like 11 or 12. So I had no male input in my life at all. Just never probably even really thought about what it meant to be a man. I think I just turned 17, joined the Army, and you were a man at that point. So with really no training or advice or guidance at all growing up.
I think for me growing up, my dad's still around, still married to my mom, and and I have a good relationship with my dad. But I think growing up, I think that cultures and cities and even families, you sort of cultivate what you celebrate. And there were certain things that were celebrated in my family, and especially celebrated by my dad. And things like being really good in sports and being able to fix things and like build things or whatever. And so when I left home, or when I graduated, I was, I worked hard and I could fix things, and I was good in sports, those kind of things. But pretty much anything, any of the softer skills that I've needed, on like how to really build a great friendship with another guy, or how to pursue a woman in a good way, how to listen well, how to, any of those types of things I've had to learn since leaving home. And so it became pretty clear, and I went off to college, that I was kind of lopsided, in some skills that, and what it means, what I feel like it means to be not just a man, but to be a kind of a successful one, or so it's just kind of strange, you kind of, if that makes sense.
That's kind of like your reaction, to a degree, right?
Yeah, and it's weird, because I think that, you get guys talking about their dads, and it can go a lot of different ways, it can, and I love my dad, and he was great at he was also just faithful to my mom, and so I think I learned that as well, just sort of being there and stuff. But a lot of the guys, especially that I know, and they talk, it just wasn't great with their dads, and I think that there's a tendency to to just want to be really careful that we don't emulate, and we can sort of react, which typically is an overreaction. And I think I see that a lot too, and it's just, it can kind of become a spiral and all that kind of stuff. And I think that there's been a little bit of that in me, like I went, I kind of left a pretty masculine home, and I went and pursued the arts, and there's a little bit of a reaction probably, and I've tried to temper that and make sure it's not an overreaction, but that's a really tricky thing with guys and their dads,
So I have a question for us that, because I think it kind of relates to that expectation of masculinity that maybe is different than what internally we feel. Almost like a fake it till we make it, sort of like, okay, this is culturally, whatever that looks like for you, an expectation of what it means to be a man that has been placed on me that maybe inside I don't really feel like I live up to. can you guys think of something like that for you where you're like, okay, I would actually, if anybody knew this about me, they may not put this in the man column, kind of thing, but it is who I am, it may not fit expectation.
I like to flip and look through fashion magazines from time to time. And I would like to comment on women's shoes or men's shirts from time to time.
You're dressed very nicely today, Andy.
Thank you.
You bring it out.
I bring it out. And I don't like hunting, or I don't like to kill things.
Okay.
Yeah, in general.
It'll keep you out of jail. So.
Either it's a deer or chicken. I don't like to kill things, and I like to talk about colorations and different things in more towards you would call it the feminine side, or you may call it. I went to engineering school, and I'm a professional licensed architect, but I work with interior design firms, and most of my coworkers are women or men with a pretty good design taste. And I am one of those rare that is in the stay in a stable relationship, raise kids, that type. But I work well with most of majority of my coworkers, and I don't like to confront people. I don't go punch people in the face in a meeting.
I think that happens a lot with men too. Again, I experienced that same kind of struggle, is trying to find out who you really are as a man. And throughout the course of my life, I found myself in different seasons of life hanging out with different people. And there was a season of life, a friend of mine was a professional bull rider. And so I hung out with mostly cowboys, and I wanted to be a part of that environment. And I really learned that really wasn't me. I mean, I got on some bulls and rode them, but I was scared to death to do it. It wasn't really what I wanted to do, but it was the expectation of hanging out with those people. And so I go through my life trying to figure out who am I, and really it can be anybody. If fashion magazines is who you are, then that doesn't make you less of a man. It just really tells me that you figured out who you are and you're comfortable with it. And for me, it was trying to figure out where am I as a man and what am I comfortable with, and trying to live into being that.
That means a lot from a guy driver.
A Harley, I was just going to say.
Backwards hat. And
because, Eric, when you and I sort of talked about this conversation and, who brainstormed who would be good in this conversation, and we said, we need a man's man in there, kind of guy that makes everyone else feel a little insecure. And it was you, Terry. So because I just see you as a guy who's, strong, capable, like a lot of things that a lot of men want to be. And so that's really interesting to hear that you would struggle with the same things, because I would not have expected that.
I think the difference, again, the older I get, is just being honest with yourself. And again, no man is perfect. We all have faults, and we all struggle in areas. It's a question of whether you're willing to be authentic about it and share it with people.
I think for me, I've kind of learned what are probably, there's just like coping skills, like in guy culture, like I've learned how to talk about hunting. I've learned how to talk about, certain things and that I don't really care about because you kind of have to fit in, And really, if the conversation is about, if it's like deeper than just cursory conversation about sports, if they're like talking about like draft picks and all that, it's like, I don't know any of that stuff. So if it's a conversation about sports or hunting or like real like business stuff or finance, and things like that, or fixing like fixing cars or whatever, like any of those things, I'm just faking it when we have those conversations. But it's interesting, like when you look at those categories, that is like mostly when guys get together, that's 80% of what they talk about. It's sports or it's their business, it's like all that kind of stuff. And so you do kind of fake it because you don't want to be the weirdo, it's like, and so yeah, but one of the things I've also learned, and like if like within a church culture or a group of friends, if they can get beyond kind of those categories that can kind of tend to divide us or like those surfacey things, I've really sensed that I think most guys are kind of struggling with a lot of the same things. Regardless, this person could be a big hunter and this person could be in fashion magazines or whatever. It's like you get beyond that level and we're the conversation becomes much more helpful, you know. But that's hard to do, and so you do kind of fake it till you make it, you know. And a lot of times, I think, in a lot of guy culture things, you never move beyond that. Like that's where the conversation stays forever, and that can leave guys feeling like they just don't have any place to belong, when really they probably do. It's just we're all, you know, talking at a certain level.
We're having this conversation in a church. You know, we all go to Chase Oaks, and depending on how long you have been involved in the church has shaped your view probably of this topic and kind of what it means to be a man. I'd love to just hear your guys' views on how the church has both helped you define masculinity in maybe a healthy way, but also maybe more focused, because in some ways I think we maybe know that answer. Maybe focus on, has there been a way where maybe the church has pigeonholed manhood, or has been in danger of maybe setting manhood in a box, and where it's like, hey, it's broader than that. Just in your experience, has the church hurt or held you back maybe from feeling like you fit a definition of masculinity?
I had a Sunday school teacher that would really harp on the side of Jesus that would get angry, and the side of Jesus that would call out truth. And, you know, like to tell the story of Jesus turning over tables often. I felt like that's the one story that we went over and over and over again. And I remember feeling, even as a middle schooler, that that's incredibly one-sided, because there is a very gracious side to Jesus. There's a very tender side to our Savior, and trying to figure out where that balance is. And
Jesus did cry.
right, absolutely, yes, he did. He felt those emotions and wasn't afraid to put those on display. And I remember thinking, there's more to this than just, you know, the Jesus that would make a whip, you know. And it was like, well, he also did other things, you know. That's awesome, but, you know, but he also had little children come and sit on his lap. So there was a balance of that. And I went in such again, I feel like pendulum swing is kind of the major theme that we're talking about, but I went from that gentleman to another, the very next year, another gentleman who overemphasized grace almost.
How do you guys process kind of this balance? It's almost like this pendulum that you're talking about of, on the one hand, wanting to be this strong, you know, I don't want to say authoritative leader, but you know what I mean, to this other side of being this gentle listener, cooperative, more open. How do you guys balance that, or think about that?
I think so much of what we think about masculinity comes from our dad and from how we were raised. And so much of what you were just talking about is a reaction to things that were excessive in a certain way. And I think, and we've already mentioned it, but I think that I've just really come to embrace the danger that pretty much every reaction is an overreaction. And I think that actually helps me understand my dad, because he's reacting too. Or he was reacting to how he was raised, you know what I mean? And it gives me a little bit more grace, you know, to understand my dad and stuff like that. But so we can sort of look back at the generation before us and see some of the excesses in a certain way, and then we react to it, and we're just sort of creating another pendulum for our own kids, you know? And so this has sort of come up again and again. It's like we seem to want to do this either or. You know, it's either, you know, strength, or it's softer and that, you know, that kind of stuff. And I think we have not, as American men, we haven't figured this out on what is that middle ground, and what I do think there's a little bit of an identity crisis.
If you were to, I want to ask, it's kind of more of a one-word answer, though you can obviously, you know, expand on it if you want to, but kind of fill in the blank to say, when I am doing blank, I feel most like a man.
When, and this doesn't happen very often, but when I can be selfless to others. Because I feel like when I am able to be selfless with other people, I feel like I'm understanding something about myself and my call as a follower of Christ. and how he lived his life and what it looks like for me to live like he has done. And I feel like those are two things that when I do them, I feel the most manly.
Mine's kind of weird because I probably have to explain it, but when I'm doing yard work, I actually feel that way. I think there's something about strength, and it's interesting because I've never felt like I was the strongest person around. I mean, a lot of that's just body style. I hate weight rooms for a lot of reasons. You can tell I don't clearly go to them very often, and it's because I've always felt like that was a place where I didn't feel like a man, because it felt like if people are gauging my masculinity on how much weight I can lift, which felt like a gauge to me. Like this is something. So if I'm not lifting the amount that you would expect or compete to the other guys, I wouldn't feel much like a man. And that's probably a wound I've carried that then says, okay, when I am able to show some kind of strength or able to persevere in something longer than like do yard work when it's on a hot day because no one else is there to do it and it won't happen unless I do it, that coming in there's a sense of satisfaction for me that's like, okay, that felt like I accomplished something. So for me, it's like, it's on those days where it's like something hard that needed to be done, that I did it, and nothing makes me happier than when my wife is like, man, I'm so glad you did that. I wouldn't have been able to do that. That's an affirmation for me that makes me feel that way.
I'm similar. When I feel that I'm being helpful to others, then I feel like I fulfilled that specific call that God calls me to. And then it was talking about being a man, then it's when I can serve my wife and my daughters well. Then when they ask for help and I can really truly help them, then I feel that, oh yes, that's the role that I feel like that's the role that God calls me to be in, and I fulfilled it. And I think on the flip side is when I cannot meet that expectation, then the whole world just crumble. Yeah.
I think for me, it's and this is relatively new to me because I never really think about it much as being a man thing, but I think I feel more like a man when I'm able to confess my weaknesses to people and be authentic. And within our life group, we're having some real hard conversations about dysfunction and things like that. And it's hard to admit that you're a dysfunctional husband or father or life group leader or whatever it is. And I shared with our life group a couple months ago that, one of my biggest struggles is to say I'm sorry to somebody. And it's clearly just a pride thing. And I could be dead wrong, but to say I'm sorry comes out, it just won't come there. And so again, to confess that to this group of people just makes me feel more manly. Again, it's an authentic, it's a weakness, but yet it's a strength that I hope I can grow into, to share that, hey, I'm not this man's man. I am just a man struggling through life, trying to figure it out.
Well, we were talking, in some ways, I think those times where we feel like, hey, we're most like a man, we can kind of even gravitate towards those things and sometimes even become like that guy. You know what I mean? Like that guy that this is my specialty, or kind of overcompensating a little bit. Have you guys seen that in our culture with your friends or even with yourself, where sometimes it's like you so want to get respect from other guys that you almost kind of like overdo it or kind of push it too far?
Yeah, absolutely. I had a buddy in high school who, no matter what we were doing, if it was indoors, outdoors, if he was taking the SAT or he was outside playing soccer, he would find a way to take his shirt off. I mean, it was outrageous.
You could just use my name.
Every time.
I've gotten past that.
Okay, well, thank the Lord. But every time I looked over, it was like, nobody even had to be looking, but it was just that caricature of the crazy guy, the wild and crazy guy. And it was just sad because even when that guy moved past that, which thankfully he did, he still would get labeled as that guy. And he wanted to live, poor guy wanted to just live normally. And people would be like, oh, it's the shirt guy. He'd be like, yeah. And he felt like he had to continue to do that because he overcompensated for all kinds of stuff with that personality. And it's a shame when that happens, because there's a lot that, when you think about, there's a lot we can do for our weaknesses. so that we don't have to just gravitate towards one strength or one ability or one thing that we have that's good doesn't have to be our only thing, I think.
Or sometimes then if somebody challenges us on that one thing, it's like,
Right.
It's
then
all-
it
You're
becomes
challenging your
like-
identity.
It's
then
fighting words.
Yeah, then that
Yeah.
becomes almost like, it goes from being, this is a source of pride or respect that I get, to almost a source of anger that controls us. And I know I've seen that in my life, where it's like, I went through even a period where it's like, I'm the funny guy, and if I wasn't funny, then I almost felt like disconnected or got angry about that, and that my identity was shaped around that. You could take almost anything else and critique me on that, but don't critique me on this thing, or don't
Yeah.
And I feel like that seems like a pretty common problem from what we're
Right.
talking about here,
Yeah,
right?
for me, is that there's a level of fear and anxiety
Yeah.
when I don't get that respect, or I sense there's a losing control of something. And in particular, if the identity is that I'm going to be that wild guy that take my shirt off, or I'm going to be a funny guy, or I'm the guy who knows everything. If I'm being challenged on those things, then there's a level of anxiety just within it. And then to add on to it, because being a man, you're supposed to be fearless. You're supposed to go out there and conquer the world and all that. And among guys, we talk about cowboys, we talk about Mavericks, but you don't talk about, hey, what is your fear? Or what are you anxious about today? You don't talk about those topics, and you just get buried deeper and deeper. Every time you come around, you just bury as deep as you could. And then you just jump back onto the more superficial things that you're good at or being respected at.
I think there's another side too. As I listen to you guys talk about overdoing to achieve the respect, I think I actually underdo to get respect. And one of the things I've shared with my life group is, again, obviously I ride a Harley. Our life group is primarily Harley. We hang out with a lot of Harley people. We go to the biker clubs and things like that. So I find myself, because I want their respect, I want to fit in with them, I underdo who I am as a Christian man. Again, for me to go to Chili's and pray over dinner is very natural. People in Chili's don't really, it's probably some people in there are praying, some aren't, but they don't pay attention to you. You go to a Strokers down on Harry Hines, and it's all bikers, and some of them are biker gangs that are down there, and we're eating lunch, and I'm looking around like, do I want to pray or don't I want to pray? Again, I underdo my masculinity because I want to fit in or I want to gain the respect rather than overdoing something.
It's interesting.
Yeah, and sometimes I feel that it's due that not only to among men, but also against women too. That we want to be the guy who figure everything out.
Yeah.
And we don't need anybody. But if God said that we need a helper.
Except for
That's
getting
true.
directions. We're not lost.
We need a helper.
We got Siri for that now, so
Yeah, we
that's okay. Yeah.
That's right.
Well, guys, thanks for a great conversation about it. I know it helped me kind of expand my views on things. Hope it was helpful for you and for those that are watching.
Let me affirm you. I think you did a very good job.
Man, I wasn't going to say that I needed it, but I'm really glad that you did.
Well, it was
Yeah.
fantastic.
Thanks,
So
Mike.
thank
Thanks,
you
Mike.
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.